Welcome to the Creative Endeavor Podcast. This is the podcast bringing you inspiring stories from creative professionals from around the world. It's real conversations with real artists. And I'm Andrew Tischler, and how awesome it is to have your company here once again. Thank you so much for joining me. In this episode, I'm talking to Paige Thomson. And this episode's going to run on the longer side of the podcast that I've brought you so far. But man, we covered a lot of ground. We got into her creative beginnings, her inspiration. We even got into a little bit of shop talk as well. Because when you have the opportunity, like I had, to talk to an artist like Paige Thomson, you just got to ask her how she does it. She's an amazing painter. So go ahead and put the coffee pot on. Clean the brushes, get everything ready to go in the studio. You're in for a nice solid block of creative time, and I know this conversation is going to inspire you like it inspired me. So I'll give you a minute to get ready, and we'll come right back with this episode. Paige Thomson comes from Boston in the United States. It was really interesting to hear about her upbringing and how she grew up. She seemed to have that right mix of circumstances, and her parents placed a high priority on her creative development. I wanted to ask her all about that and how she went from those experiences to be the painter that she is today. At only 24 years old, she's producing some incredible artwork. And I'm telling you right now, I hope she doesn't mind me saying this, but when I look at her work, it really reminds me of Soroya and Sargent. It's that good. As far as I'm concerned, anyway, there's a freshness in the brush strokes. There's a beautiful, understated quality to the way she paints things. Yet, when you look at these works, they just seem so beautifully resolved. I enjoy this idea that the artist can take something that most people wouldn't pay attention to, and they give it a new life. They give it a feeling of importance so that we can turn and look at these things that we might pass by in our everyday walk and stop for a moment and look at these things and go, wow, that's amazing. I never looked at it like that before. I think this is the role of the artist in some circumstances, and Paige Thomson certainly takes this to a whole nother level. She paints some incredible subjects, but she does so with heart and feeling. So in addition to asking her about her creative journey, her upbringing, how she started, I also wanted to ask her about the craft of painting. So there's a nice section in here where we just talk shop. I appreciate doing that with other artists, and especially when you get an artist as open as Stephanie is, it's really nice to hear how they go about producing their amazing artwork. Now, I know you're going to be super inspired by this conversation just as much as I was. Before we get into it, though, let me ask you a huge favor. If you don't mind, please leave me a rating or a review on whatever audio platform you're listening on. You might not think that does much, but it actually makes a huge difference to this show and getting it up there in the ranks, and I really appreciate you doing so. And if you get something out of the creative endeavor, if you find this inspiring while you're producing artwork in the studio, or maybe you're, stuck in traffic listening to this, wishing that you were painting, then please, if you don't mind, just share this with a friend so that they may be inspired also. Man, I really appreciate that extra little bit of effort. I couldn't do it without you, so thank you so much. Oh, goodness, I can't believe I nearly forgot to tell you this. But right now you're listening to the audio version of the podcast, and there is a video version. And I'm going to tell you right now, that's not something you're going to want to miss. While we're talking about Stephanie's artwork, I'm going to be cutting into the video version some of the images that we're talking about, as well as images from some of the people that she's really inspired by and some of the people that took her under their wing when she was up and coming. So you're not going to want to miss that. The only place to find the video version of the podcast is on my Patreon page. Just search my name on Patreon, Andrew Tischler Artist, or find the link that is alongside this podcast on whatever audio platform you're listening on. It's only $5 a month for some amazing exclusive content that you're not going to find anywhere else. So go ahead right now and join me over on Patreon. I'll see you there. Now, without further ado, let's get into this podcast. Here's Stephanie Paige Thomson and the Creative Endeavor. Stephanie Paige Thomson, welcome to the Creative Endeavor podcast. What a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Lots of things I want to talk to you about. So many directions that we can go in this conversation. Let's kick things off. I guess I've been following you for, oh gosh, how long have you been on Instagram for? It must have been a few years now, but I think I must have been following you now for 2.5 years on Instagram. I'm blown away by your work. Your painting style is incredible. I hope you don't mind me saying this, but when I look at your paintings, my first thing is just like, how? They've just got this gorgeous painterly quality to them that is so reminiscent of my hero artist. And I desperately want to paint like that. I really want to paint like that. They've got this Soroy Sargent vibe. And I'm looking at this going, this is the work of somebody who has been painting for decades. And then I look at you and you can't even be 30 yet. How old are you? Do you mind me asking?
I'm 24.
Oh, come on. It's not fair. Okay, now let's kick things off here. Tell me how this journey started for you yesterday.
You get started for me yesterday. That's so funny because I feel when I turned 20, I had like a little bit of a meltdown because I thought that I was past my prime. So it's funny because that was actually a real issue for me. But I started painting when I was 14 using oils and painted a bunch of master studies. And I didn't know that's what they were, but I tried to paint my own things from real life and they made me so upset and I couldn't do it. I had no idea what value was. I had no idea what color temperature was. I had no idea about anything. So I just had these posters that my dad had given me of Monet and Van Gogh paintings. And so I just copied those because I could do a really good copy, I thought. And so anyway, so that started the whole process. I took a class that was sort of a, here's how to oil paint. And it was very intense for a 14-year-old. I was homeschooled also as a side note. So that was part of the ability to take this class. It was in the wintertime and it was specifically taught by an artist whose name is Barry Stebbing. And he traveled around the country, he and his wife, teaching art classes called How Great Thou Art, based on the beauty of creation, to homeschooled kids. And so I took a class by him. And like I said, it was for 14-year-olds. It was very intense. He had us doing homework. We were there painting for, I think it was like 8 hours, for 5 straight days. And I still have the paintings I did. I don't have them here. I'm pretty sure they're at my mom's house. But anyway, so that started my process of oil painting. And then I just sort of played around with it throughout high school, painted a lot of paintings in 2011. Of Van Goghs, Monets, mostly just those two because I had posters of them and I could copy them. So if you go to any of my family members' houses or a couple of really good close family friends, you'll see a bunch of paintings by me, all from 2011, that are all master studies. So anyway, so when I graduated high school, I was 17, and I always thought that I would not go into art. I had done that class. I'd painted a little bit. I drew frequently. But I don't know why I had this thought, but I would see people struggle in the world. And I just thought, well, why didn't you just go to college for a better job? Then you wouldn't be struggling. And so I just thought, well, I won't do art because I don't really want to have a hard life. I think that's literally what I thought to myself at one point when contemplating what I'd do after high school, which was just a very odd thing to think about. But when I graduated high school, I realized that I was actually interested in seeing if I could become good at art, because I was always the art kid. And I've actually heard a couple other artists say this. I was the art kid. And that's what I was. In my family, I was the best artist. In my extended family, I was the best artist. In all of my friend groups, I was the best artist, probably because I was the only one that was really drawing. I'm not totally sure. So I had this ego that I was like an artist, but I also had this sort of imposter syndrome that I was viewed as an artist, and I had this identity as being an artist. My sister could sing, so she was the singer and I was the artist. But I knew that I actually couldn't draw very well, and I knew I couldn't make people look like themselves because I couldn't. I was drawing all the time, but I was never getting like a likeness because I wasn't trying, because I was afraid. So when I graduated high school, I reached out to Barry Stebbing, who I mentioned just before, who had taught me my first art class, and said, okay, I think I would like to go to art school. I think I would like to paint. What would you recommend? And he said, don't go to a traditional art school because of a lot of different reasons. He said, you will have to take all these other classes. They'll teach you things about the world and the Bible and God that are not true. And you don't need to be exposed to that. And if you want to paint, you need to learn how to paint. You don't need to have a degree, unless you want to do art therapy, or you want to be teaching maybe in like a public school system. If you want to be a school teacher for art, then maybe you'll need a degree. But if you are going to be a gallery artist, painter, they do not care if you have a degree, and what you need is to learn to paint. So he gave me the name of an artist named C.W. Mundy, who I'm certain you know, and he lives actually in my same town where I grew up. I grew up right outside of Indianapolis, Indiana. So he has lived in Indianapolis for a long time. So that was extremely good advice. I've thought back on it many times and just thought, wow, what a blessing that I called him. My mom told me, reach out to Barry because he'll have good advice for you. And I hadn't talked to him for a long time. So anyway, I took his advice and I looked to see where I could study with CW. So this was when I was 17. So I'm not really certain what year this had to be. My mental math is not good, so I'm not even going to try to do that on the fly, but it's like 6 or 7 years ago. So I looked for where I could find CW Mundy teaching, and he was teaching in Southern Indiana in the fall. And I called to get into the workshop, and they called me back and said, honey, I'm really sorry, but you're the 14th person on the wait list, and there's 14 students in the class. The chance of you getting in is basically zero. So please find another workshop. We'd still love to have you. So the nature of this workshop weekend was there in Southern Indiana. I don't know if it's still happening, but on a different level. A big name artists would all come to this town in Southern Indiana and teach. And it is a very small town, and they would take over all these different buildings in the town for a week. And so there'd be like 5 workshops happening. So it was like Sue Lyon is teaching at the library, and Scott Burdick is teaching at the high school, and at the Catholic church gymnasium, CW is teaching. and Quang is in the Lutheran church gymnasium. And there's only 2 restaurants in this whole town. And so each workshop had like a staggered lunchtime, or else it would just decimate the town. So you had a half hour to go to a different lunch. And like I said, it's different now. I don't think that there's the same teachers going, and the workshops are still happening, but it's different. It was, looking back, I feels like it was just like I don't know, golden age of when to be able to go to a workshop like this, go to your first workshop. So my mom and I went. It's just so awesome. My mom and I went. I was 17, so she wasn't really all that keen on sending me to a town 3 hours south of where we lived and just sending me into this unknown. And I'd had a discussion with my parents, and they said, they didn't say as much as they told me later is what they were thinking about. So I'll share the thing they said and then what they had said to each other that influenced how they handled this. They said to me, you're young to graduate high school. You could study art for a year and decide that it's not for you, and then go to college or do what arises that makes sense for you to do. But you should take this year, and you should take as many workshops as you can. And we're going to treat this like your first year of college. So in college, you wouldn't be having a job because you'd be studying. So we don't expect you to sell any paintings. We don't expect you to make a business out of this and make a profit, because that's not what we would expect of you if you were a nurse. You wouldn't be nursing on the side and then paying for school. So your original question being, how did I start this a year, just so recently, all of my thanks has to go to God, but then also to my parents, because they've been so supportive right from the very start. Extremely supportive. So anyway, so she went with me to this workshop, and I go into the workshop the first day, and all of the artists in there are working artists. They're all 20 years older than I am, which has never been really something that throws me off. Just with a couple of different things in my life, I've always been interacting with people a different age group. So that wasn't really weird, but it was just indicative of what would happen later. I was always the youngest one in all these workshops. And the first day I took a workshop with Ken Backus. So because I couldn't get with CW, I went to someone else that was teaching that same week and thought, well, if I can just get there, I can meet CW. So, and I'm sure all the other teachers will be good, which again, I just look back and see the Lord's providence to me and goodness, because I could have just said, okay, well, I'll just wait until he teaches again. And I think that the reasons I didn't do that was because the other places he was teaching was California and like Mexico City or something. And there was zero chance that I was going to get to those places. So I go into the workshop that first day, and he starts talking about composition, like the rule of thirds and all of these things. No idea what that was. He talks about value. No idea what that is. Color temperature. Absolutely no idea where to start even understanding that. And I was just overwhelmed all day long. And my tools weren't correct. I had the wrong type of canvas. Everyone had panels. I had stretched canvases from Michael's. I couldn't wipe away. People were toning and wiping away off of their linen panels. I couldn't do that. They knew what they were doing and I didn't. So anyway, at the end of this day, I come out of the library, because it was being hosted in the library of this town, and my mom was in the car, and I got in the car and said, okay, we need to drive away because I'm going to start to cry. And she looked at me and was like, what happened in there? I dropped you off all day with people I don't know, is everything all right? And I was just like, everything is totally fine. I just have no idea what they're talking about. I do not understand, but I want to understand it so badly. And he's telling me how to understand it, but I do not know. And I thought I was going to go in there and be awesome. So it was just a really interesting place. I share all of this in depth because where I started, I think it really matters to know that I had a huge ego, which I didn't know I had, going into my first workshop. And then I was destroyed by it, by seeing how much I didn't know. but then also inspired because I could see the beautiful work that Ken was creating, and he was telling me the tools and the techniques to get there. And I was super motivated to understand. And what was interesting was I had paid for the whole workshop with selling art. And I was super concerned that I would pay for the whole thing. Even though my parents had said all this, I was like, well, no, but I want to pay for the whole thing. So I paid for this whole workshop. And I got in the car also and said, well, I'm just going to return all of the money. I was a little, I was just upset. And I was like, I'm returning all of the money for all of these paintings that I did to all these people because they were terrible. And my mom was like, no. You're just going to start from here and go upward. So anyway, so that was where I started. I did end up getting to meet C.W. Mundy, and was just able to connect right away to this community of painters who were representational, realist, impressionist, big people like Quang, Dan Gerhardt's I got to meet, Laura Robb. And I just am so thankful because that was the kind of art that I am most drawn to. And I was put in a place without me really even knowing where I would be able to meet of all these people. And so I went to that same workshop year after year, I think 4 years in a row, and studied with a good number of people. And what was so interesting, Andrew, was because the town was so small, I could know when the other workshops were getting out. So I would look at the list on the different days and see that Quang Ho's workshop got out and it overlapped for the same half hour. And I went to the restaurants looking for Quang Ho. And then I would buy lunch and happen to stumble upon where he was sitting with whatever people he was talking to. And I mean, I did this with Sulayan. I did this with all the other people who I wanted to talk to, and was like, oh, wow, I wanted to be in your workshop, but I couldn't because it was full. Can I talk to you over lunch? And then I would happen to have my portfolio or something, and so funny. So anyway, so through a great advice from some artists who I really respect, CW being one of them, I kept going on that workshop journey for that first year. And I think I took 4 that year, which is a lot. But there were a couple of things that happened that were just really special. I've heard about the Portrait Society at a workshop I took. So I took that one in the April, and then I found an art teacher that week locally who could help me get a likeness and teach me about value and teach me about color temperature, because I knew that week was not enough. I was introduced to the topics, but I didn't know them enough to go out and do them. I needed a teacher to keep reinforcing me and actually teach them to me. So her name is Charlene Brown. And I studied with her for, I think, a year. And I was in her drawing class and her painting class. So I was at her house 2 nights a week for basically a year, and usually 3 times, because we became very good friends, and I would just go over to her house so we could paint together. And what was interesting was her painting class at the time, she had it offered, and there just didn't have any students in the painting class for various reasons. And so I was the only student in her painting class. So I was basically getting private lessons, but she didn't charge me for private lessons because she already had the painting class like set aside. So anyway, it's just all these crazy things that happened that made it possible for me to have a lot of education that first year. So I took another workshop in the fall with Don Whitelaw, and I found out about Portrait Society and was able to meet a lot of artists who I've been studied with. So that I kept that up for about 4 years, and just had this vision of, or just this daily habit of painting. And that first starting point of having my ego destroyed, but knowing that the only thing separating me and those people that were teaching workshops was hard work and time. And people always say like mileage, canvas mileage, was what I would think about every single day. And I would get up and I would paint, and I would think, okay, this one doesn't have to work out. This one probably is going to be bad, but I'm going to figure out what's wrong with it so I can make the next one better, and I will eventually make a great painting. And through that process, painted a ton of stinkers and occasionally painted a good one. So on Thursdays, I would go to drawing class at Charlene's house, and then I would go to life drawing. So drawing class was an hour and a half, and then life drawing was 3 hours in the evening, and she would drive me there. And then I can't remember how I got home, but that doesn't matter. So I would go to this 3-hour life drawing class, and she was bringing me through this method of how to get a likeness, with a lot of measuring until eventually you could train your eye. And I had done a bunch of master copies of portrait paintings. So to get a feel for just how to use paint to make a face. And then she gave me photos of people to paint, so I could start translating reality into paint instead of paint to paint, paint to paint with the master copies, reality to paint, but 2D. And then she said, okay, now you should start coming to life drawing. And so you can have all of the elements of working from life. Well, now you have some foundation of understanding just how to make a face on a canvas. So I was doing that. And the people there were so nice. And, everyone was like adopted me as their own because I was so young. And that happened in all of the workshops. And so I did a painting of a woman named Kathy, and I thought it was decent. And it was decent. It was fine. I took it, I had it in a show. It was the first show I ever got into. It was a show here called the Hoosier Salon in Indiana. And I had done this little wheelbarrow painting, plein air, in my backyard that I took to show some artists. And they said, this is a nice painting. And so I thought, okay, well, this is a painting I could put into a show because I wanted to enter shows. And I had this portrait of Kathy, and I put them into this show called the Hoosier Salon. And when I entered, you put your prices and everything, and I priced them $150 and $250. And they were 6x8 and 12x16. And because I literally was doing this in my basement, and I was like, I don't know. I mean, this is more than I would pay for them, but I was 17 years old pricing my own paintings. And they both got in, and they both sold at the opening night.
Awesome.
And I was so blown away. And CW Mundy is in this show, and these artists locally that are amazing painters. And I was just like at the opening, just feeling like this was the most magical time of my whole life, that I was in a show, people could see my paintings on the wall, and they actually hung my portrait of Kathy behind a sculpture on a wall that was facing it was like on a corner wall, and this wall was huge and well lit with a bunch of paintings, and then this wall was the corner side was really dark, and a sculpture was right in front of it, and they put my painting there. But a sweet woman bought it that opening night, and I've thought before, was that woman an angel? Because they told me that it sold, the people with the clipboards, and my mom was there, and she was like, oh my gosh, Stephanie, that's so amazing. And I said, well, is the woman here? I'd love to meet her and say thank you. And it's probably mercy she left, because I would have just like gushed all over her. But they said, oh no, she came and she bought it and she left right away. So I've never gotten to meet her. But it was just that night, I just thought, wow, this is so special. And I later, like I told you, cornered Quang Ho and showed him my paintings that I thought were the best from the last year. And this was like the next spring after the show happened. And he saw my painting of Kathy and was like, yeah, I mean, this is not successful. All of your shapes are broken, and you don't have any clear light and shadow patterns, which is all true. And I was just sitting there and I was like, oh, shot through the heart. I was like, no, this is my best painting. It got into a show. So anyway, it was just the classic
wow,
thinking
thanks.
that you've arrived, and then just getting constantly realizing there's more and more you can always learn.
Yeah. So
that was so funny. And it was all very good advice and true, and I learned from it. But so zoom out a little bit and going more big picture. I was able to take a lot of workshops over about a 4-year period, mimicking roughly what a college experience length would be, and traveled to Arizona and Vermont, to different hubs of where workshops were being taught. and was able to study with some really top-notch people and meet some artists who I thought were just, kind of like, they were my heroes so much that they probably just didn't exist in everyday life to be met, but was really thankful to be able to study with great people. So that's how I started painting.
That's amazing. Wow. Wow. Okay. I'm just trying to work out now which thread do I want to pick up and ask you more about? It's just extraordinary. I tell you, the thing that strikes me as I hear that is, I'm just going to be completely honest with you, a little bit of jealousy, because I'm one of those poor sods that did that art school path, and I went to a tertiary institution, and it was very modern, it was very contemporary. The type of painting that I wanted to do was really frowned upon, and I didn't even get into it again until at least a couple of years, might have been 2 or 3 years after I graduated, that I started recovering and starting to do what I wanted to do. And that sounds like such an amazing way of learning the skills by talking to these people that are just giants, absolute giants. Like Quang is amazing. He's an amazing painter. Mundy is an amazing painter. Lion, Scott Burdick, you mentioned Daniel Gerhardt's as well, right? And he's incredible. Like, his work is just off the charts. So yeah, it makes sense to go where the best people working in the industry are. But it's funny, when you say it, it's like, yeah, oh yeah, that makes sense. I've never heard of anybody doing that. Like, yeah, okay, going to take the art workshop. Oh, this artist is cool. I'll go and study this. But going, no, I'm just going to start drilling this again and again and again. So how quickly would you have said then, what was that learning curve? Because again, I can also relate, with looking back at my past work, just going, and then you have a realization, you meet somebody that's like, oh, this person really knows what they're talking about, and suddenly it causes you're like insanely inspired. But then you go back to the easel and you look at it, you're like, oh, start again. So how long did that process take overall before, like, to give us an idea of the trajectory from when you first started that journey of going to people's workshops, before that first, town body of workshops where they all descended on the one town, and you first kicked off there, to you stepping out as what you would have considered a professional?
Okay, so that's a big question. So it's an interesting definition of what you would define professional as.
How do you define professional? Are you a professional artist now? You definitely are to me. But how do you define professional?
I would say, yes, I am a professional artist. I paint full time, and I'm very thankful to be able to do that.
Awesome.
My definition of a professional artist before, when I was in a workshop stage, year 1 or year 2, and I was just like very new, and I was, every artist that was teaching a workshop was so amazing. I just was like, wow, your life is perfect when you get to the level of teaching workshops and being in shows like Portrait Society and being in magazines. Like, that's when you're a professional artist. You are so happy creating all the time. It has to be easy at that point, like that was what professional art was to me. Like, the point where you just are like, oh, I'm it now, and then I'll just paint for the rest of my life, having a great time. That's what I thought it was. And I've learned that that's not true. That the more the more you don't know. And so you just keep going on this learning curve of seeking the next level, which I'm really thankful, because maybe some people don't have that same feeling. I don't know. People talk about plateauing and stuff.
Well, growth has got to be built into it. But I find that a lot of people, when they start out, and this is true for me, I'll speak for myself really, but when I started out, I was obsessed with this idea of arriving at a point where it's like I could accept myself as being, okay, now I've made it. Now I can paint the type of image that I'm seeing in my head. But the thing is, by the time you get to that point, there's another rung on the ladder that suddenly appears, and it's like, oh, now I need to learn this thing and this thing and this.
Right.
And then you quickly realize, the further down the road you go and the more you push this thing, is that there's always more to know. There's no end to it. And look, I mean, okay, we both have faith, and we're both Christian here, but really, the way I see this is like, okay, I am, if I really get too far ahead of myself, I'm really competing, that canvas. I'm trying to create something that is representing what the creator has done.
Mm-hmm.
But he's painting with physical material and light and colors and real distance and real depth. And it's like, am I really going to compete with that? That's what I'm competing with there. And he's got me whipped every single way. So it's like, how full of yourself can you get? There's so much more to understand. And it's, you'll think it's like, oh, I can paint a pretty decent sunset. And it's like, oh yeah, what about this sunset? And it's like,
right.
Whoa, you're
right.
looking at it, it's just mind blowing.
Right. Yes, it's I can resonate with every single thing that you just said. And my younger self didn't see that. My younger self thought, someday I will paint something. This is actually literally exactly it. Are you familiar with Portrait Society or what that organization is?
Yeah, but please tell us.
It's a society for painters, for figurative art, and they put on a conference every single year. And I went to that conference the first year. So I think this had to be 2016. And I went to it with my mom. Again, I got a scholarship to go. And so I was at this conference. I think it was in Atlanta, or I think it was actually in Virginia this year. And I saw all these painters on stage who I just thought were amazing, who are amazing. I think I was worshiping them a little bit more than I should have at that point, to be honest. But and I saw them, and I saw their presentations and heard what they were talking about. It just was incredible, and you get a little bit more of a feel, being able to just, it's a little different than a workshop environment because there's different topics. People were sharing about their just everyday creative life. And I, at some point, was watching, I think I was watching James Gurney or something, or maybe, it doesn't matter who it was, but they were presenting on stage, and my mom was sitting next to me, and she said, "So what do you think?" Just whispered to me. And I looked at her and I said, "I'm going to be up there. I want to be those people. I want to do that."
Wow.
And she was like, "Okay, all right." So this was in that first year of like, you don't have to be a painter. If you hate this, you don't feel like you need to do this. But I forgot to tell you what they said to each other. Wow. My parents apparently had talked to each other before they had, had a conversation with me where they said, "Yeah, we're going to totally support you with this. You have a year. After the year, we'll reevaluate." They said to each other, apparently, that they didn't want me to grow up and have regrets of not pursuing something that could have been. And I am so thankful for that, because all of these years in these workshops and just meeting artists, I've met so many who just say, "Wow, my parents told me I needed to be an engineer or do all these, I went to school for this because they said I needed to do that." And while I see that there's great care on both sides and parents want what's best for their children, I am really thankful for what my parents did for me by pursuing that with me, because I do think that I would have a lot of regret if I hadn't pursued it, and if I had gone to be a dental assistant like I thought I was for a little while.
What a crime that would have been. What a shame that would have been. Wow. Yeah.
Thank you. So anyway, so the Portrait Society, that was my ultimate goal. I saw someone win the Draper Grand Prize that year. Actually, Michael Klein won it, and I have since gotten to know Michael Klein.
Shout out Michael Klein. Michael, if you're listening, I promise I'm going to use that thing you sent me. I promise. I haven't done it yet, but I've got it sitting right. Oh no, it's in the downstairs studio. It's this little Pashad palette. It's cool.
Oh, I want one of those super bad. They're so cool.
Awesome.
And Michael and Ellie, if you are listening, I really love you guys. So I saw him win it, and I just thought, wow, that is the ultimate to be in that show. And in 2020, I got into it. So that would have been 4 years later that I was a finalist in it. I entered it in 2019 with a portrait, and it got a certificate of excellence. And then I entered the next year, and I got in as a finalist. And
wow,
of course, that was the year that it all got canceled. So it never happened. And I realized specifically, like, what is a professional painter? I thought it was this moment of glory, going up and accepting the Draper Grand Prize and being on stage and being able to make this amazing painting. And now my vision of that is much different, because all of that didn't happen. And I didn't get to enjoy the whole experience of like being a finalist. And I realized how much my vision of what it was to be a professional artist was driven again by my ego of like, when everyone else tells me that I'm a professional painter is when I am one. And how that's not necessarily true. So anyway, so in 2016 was the first time that I started taking workshops. And then in 2020, I would say is that's when I got into the finalist. And I've been in other shows, but that was the first international show that I entered and was able to place in.
That's amazing. That's so amazing. Isn't it interesting? I mean, I find that as well. Like I would have thought that particular things or particular milestones, whether I achieved them or not, some I did, some I didn't. But you kind of build up this vision and this image in your mind. If I can only do that, if I can only be that, if I can only get there, then it'll be okay. And the thing that I'll add to that is, if I can only tick that box, then I'll be able to accept myself. Because I was trying to do that, just personally, just reflecting on what you're saying here. And then I realized the more that I did that, the more miserable I got. Mm-hmm. And the thing that the last couple of years have given me, despite all the challenges that the world's been going through and people have been facing, I don't want to be insensitive to that, but it's really caused me to focus on just showing up daily and just creating, and just actually just don't worry about an outcome, focus on the process. And just like, I get to paint today. Cool. About what you were saying before, about being a professional artist and having this vision in your mind. It's going to be wonderful. It's great. And then I'll get a jacuzzi big enough that I can sit in there with the easel and paint while I'm sipping martinis or whatever. It ain't like that. It ain't like that. You get the chlorine in the martini and then your brushes get soggy. It's terrible. But sorry, I'm a massive dork. Apologies.
Not at all.
But no. you build up this vision of what you think it's going to be like, and then reality sets in, and then you have to, at that certain point, you have to reevaluate and go, okay, well, maybe it's not about me, being on the stage.
Right.
Because I've got to say this, I'm going to keep coming back to this. The evidence of your journey is present in your body of work. I'm looking at your Instagram, and I encourage everybody to go and follow you right now on Instagram. Everybody listening to this, but the people watching the video version of this, exclusively on Patreon, they will be able to see I'm going to cut in here images of your paintings and some of the artists also that we've been talking about. The evidence of that time and that dedication and that effort is present in the body of work that you have. And that right there is just, that's amazing. I know it's different because it's you and you're in it, but from the outside looking in, It's like that's where the real what's the word I'm looking for? Payoff is just in the sheer quality of what you're producing now. It's like that cumulative result of the hard graft, and now you're at this point. I mean, I really do want to ask you. So you tell me uh, how much you can say, but I do want to ask you just briefly about one portrait. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of portraits I want to ask you about, but there's one portrait that I find just absolutely stunning, and that's Main Man. Can I ask you about that?
Oh yeah, for sure. There's a huge story behind Main Man, um, personally, and then also with the fact that Main Man is the sitter. The subject is Jamie Wyeth, which is very special. Just everyone knows who Jamie Wyeth is if you're listening to this podcast. So I'll share how I got to paint Jamie, and then I'll share the personal side to it because it also kind of blends into this whole topic about being a painter and creating every day and creating also for a living. Um, so in 2019, the summer of 2019, I was able to live in Southern Maine for the summer. And I had a connection to Maine, which is something we haven't talked about at all, which is falconry. I don't know if we're going to talk about that at any point.
I'd
We
love
don't
to
know.
ask you about it because it's something that shows up in your website and your portfolio, and again, it's some images that I've seen on your social media. So I'd love to ask you about that, but we'll come around to that. Yeah,
Perfect. That topic can just take over a conversation. So anyway,
excellent.
so I had a falconer friend who I knew through the sport of falconry, which we'll talk about, who lives in Maine, and had the opportunity to go there and live for the summer and work part-time scooping ice cream and paint the rest of the time. And it was a very magical time. I worked part-time, so I would scoop ice cream 4 nights a week from 5 to 11 p.m. And then I would wake up at 4:30 and paint. I would paint the sunrise almost every single day at 4:30 and then all day long, and then come home and shower and eat, and then scoop ice cream. And so I also was just taking advantage the whole time I was there of what Maine had to offer. And so I went to see a retrospective show of Jamie Wyeth's paintings that was happening at the Farnsworth in Rockport, which was about 2 hours north of where I was living. And it was an amazing show. It was paintings of his wife, Phyllis, who had just passed away a few months before. And it was paintings and drawings and little gouache studies that he'd done of her throughout their marriage of something like 50 years. And I have rarely been so moved by a show of paintings. It was so special. And it's something that I realize I'm drawn to specifically by other people's work, is when it just feels so personal. And you can feel their love for what they're painting through the painting. So I could just see throughout all of these, it was like 25 works, and you could watch her grow and grow old throughout these works. And I just was so struck by them. I mean, I was there for like 4 hours. I was just staring at these paintings thinking, okay, I have been working so hard just to be able to paint a person. And now I see the next level, which is, how do I create something that is so moving that it's almost like you don't want to look at it because it feels so personal. I was looking at these paintings and I just thought, wow, this is like a visual diary, it's a diary without words. It's a diary with colors, because it was just so evident how much he loved her. And I just was so struck by that. And I just thought, wow, I cannot believe I didn't know, I just hadn't been touched by paintings like that before. So I just had all these questions on my mind already of just like, what kind of person creates this? Like, I want to, how can you take the technical side and then blend it so seamlessly with your life and be able to create like a visual picture of your life? You know, I was like, that's what I would like to do. I would like to be able to paint so well that I can just share the things and the people I love visually. So anyway, I found out that day that he was going to be doing a lecture about the retrospective, and I was able to meet him at the end and ask him just questions about the paintings, and mostly just just say they were really incredible. And I happened to have my sketchbook with me, and I wasn't going to do this. I wasn't going to be this person, but I was just like, you know what, actually, we're standing right here, and could I have your autograph? And so he looked through my sketchbook and he said, well, so you're here for the summer? And I said, yes, I'm here for the summer. I live in Indiana. And he was like, okay, well, if you're ever on Monhegan Island, you should let me know. And I was like, okay. So anyway, long story short, I had friends on Monhegan Island that I was able to go and stay with before I left, and let him know that I would be there, and I was able to paint him there. And so that's how I was able to get that that painting. I actually painted that from a photo, but you can go on my Instagram and see the portrait I did of him. So I finished Main Man, which I would like to talk about, the portrait of Main Man, because it's very interesting how it came to be. But I finished it and put it into Portrait Society. And they called me, or they sent me an email or something pretty soon to when the judging would be happening. Like a couple of weeks after I'd entered it. And they said, okay, we just want you to make sure that you know what our rules are, because you can't use anyone else's photograph or anyone else's works. Like, you have to have all original sources. Is this Wyeth? That's all that they said. And I was like, okay, so I think they think that they recognize him, which is great. That's a compliment. I was able to get a likeness. And I think they think that it wasn't my photo. So I just wrote back. I was like, yes, this is my photo. It is. I have permission to use this, which was just a funny thing. But I was painting. So I was able to do that summer and go to Maine. And I came home back to Indianapolis area and was painting. And I was painting because I was saying, I'm a professional artist now. Also that summer, I had been just so blessed. I had painted several large paintings before I left for Maine, so that I would be able to be in shows that would be happening while I was in Maine. So I had gotten all my paintings ready. They were all entered. They were all boxed to just be delivered to the things if they got in. And the two main paintings I had done, I was just so blown away and blessed. They both received Best of Show in 2 shows that summer.
Wow.
So,
awesome.
Which was just a huge blessing. And ironically, it was also like 4 years after I first got into that first Hoosier Salon show, my painting won Best of Show in it. And so I was in Maine, and I was just, I was so thankful. And so those sorts of things I came home that winter, and I had entered those 2 shows. I had won Best of Show in them. I had gotten into Portrait Society as an excellent exceptional merit, or it's the level below finalist. So it wasn't a finalist, but I had gotten in and recognized. And so my personal bar was, okay, so if I can't top this next year, I'm a failure.
Oh.
And I'm professional. So this is what I should do every year. Every year I need to be able to do this. I don't know if you do Enneagrams or if anyone listening does Enneagrams, but I'm an Enneagram type 3, and that has been very helpful to understand. Do you do it? Do you know what that is or
I
no?
do. I don't go there though, but I can explain later why that is. But that's fine. That's fine. I ain't judging. I ain't judging.
Um, there's certain things about that are very applicable to me and
Okay.
help me understand how I
Yeah.
how I work. So anyway, very performance driven. So
Okay. Yeah.
anyway, so I came home in the fall and I just was like, had this weight, this personal weight of, rather than just being like, wow, thank you, Lord, for all of this blessing that you gave me this year. I am so thankful. I was more just thinking, I just need to be able to do this again next year. I need to keep this up. This is now now I'm a professional. I can't make any more bad paintings, and I wasn't necessarily thinking that in words, in my mind, but that's how I was acting. And so I was just painting with the idea of being impressive and, was hating it. And you mentioned this, the more that you seek after that, the more miserable you are. And that's not why I started painting. That's not why I love to create. That's not why I love the act of painting. It's not, if that had been my motivation, I would have sought to make my life all about painting. And I was reminded of that by several very close people in my life. Michelle Dunaway being one, and also a huge influence who I didn't mention as being one of my workshop instructors who I studied with, who is now a really good friend. I'm really thankful for a lot of things that she's done for me. But I called her and I was like, I can't even paint as well as I could a month ago. I can't paint. I am miserable. And so she was on the phone with me and she was like, you don't need to be able to enter all these shows every year. That's not what's important. Like, you don't need to enter them every single year at all. That's not what this is about. And so just let it go, basically, and shared her own personal journey. And I just realized that's why I'm so stressed out. I'm trying to just get into all these shows so I can prove to myself I'm a professional painter.
Yeah.
Stupid. So I let it go. And this was like, I can't remember what month. I think this was December of 2019. And I had been painting all of these things that I thought would get into shows and not following just something that Sue Lyon had said to me years before in a workshop, which I still think about all the time. She said to me, follow your goosebumps. And I just thought, well, that's so cute, like that's so cute at the time. And it came back to me so clearly at this time. And I realized, literally, I remember her saying, follow your goosebumps. And I thought, I have stopped following the things that give me goosebumps, because I'm so either just amazed by them, or I just can't wait to paint them, or because I'm just so intrigued by the visual aspect. It might not even be the subject matter, it might be the color harmony. I had stopped following my goosebumps and I was following my pride. And so I let that go. I was like, I'm not entering these shows. I just need to paint. I just need to get back to where I was when I started painting, of just painting, just to grow and to enjoy the act of painting. And so I started this painting of Main Man. And I worked on it and I started it pretty big. I did all these studies of it, and I've talked about this, but I finished it in like about 3 weeks. And this is the ironic part. The deadline for Portrait Society was in 3.5 weeks. And I knew that, but I also was not, I said, I'm not entering it. This is what I'm painting, and I am going to paint this because I want to. And I was genuinely so excited about it. And anyway, so I did this painting in kind of a record time for me. I'm a pretty slow painter at times. And I finished it the day of the entry and entered it. And I literally said to my mother, well, if it doesn't get in, I'm repainting the whole face because it's terrible. I'm just going to repaint the whole face. I think I was actually in tears that day because I was just like, now it's not as good as it could have been. I was just like, I'm going to enter it because I think it's worth it. So again, this is just the ridiculous emotions of a creative person sometimes. But
Oh, I
did.
cringe when you say, I'm sorry, but I cringe when you say that. And I don't mean to gush right now, but I guess I am a little bit. This is a beautiful portrait, and the face is heartbreakingly beautiful. It's so good. It is so good. And I look at that, and that is something that okay. I aspire to make a portrait look like that. That is just
Oh,
stunning. The
thank you.
freshness of the brushwork, the presence. It's not overworked. It's not complicated. It's not in terms of like it technically. There's some stuff going on there that okay, go, all right. We need to talk shop because I just want to ask you how your edges are perfect. They're beautiful. Like the way two zones meet and you get this beautiful
Thank you.
look, we need to talk shop. We need to geek out about the painting. But when you say that, I'm sorry again. I keep cutting you off, but I just look at that and I'm just like, it is a beautiful painting. Okay, and again, for the video version of the podcast, people are going to get a treat because they'll be able to see this portrait. Um, wow, I'm glad you didn't go back and rework it.
I am too. I am too. Yes, I am very thankful too. That's where I was when I finished it. And I think that's just something I've also learned about myself. When I think that what I'm doing is terrible, I need to just step away from it because it's probably
Right.
not as bad as it is.
Yeah.
But I got a call like a week or 2 weeks. It had to be like probably a month actually after I entered it, and it was a finalist. And that was to me what being the pinnacle of a painter was. And when it all got canceled and none of it happened, I realized that being a painter is about the joy of painting, and it's not about the pleasure of being praised for the painting that you've made, at least for me. And I had misplaced my worth in a couple of ways by needing out loud of that affirmation. And so it was kind of a blessing that it all got canceled, because I learned that, that it's not about, for me, my motivation can't and shouldn't be impressing other people and being able to have the opportunity to publicly be praised for a painting, because that's first of all, the Lord should be, I'm painting for the Lord in his glory and not my own. So that was the first area that was totally off. And then also just when I create from a place of just joy and creating is when I create paintings that then make people like you, who I so respect, say such really nice things about them. I make my best work.
It's awesome. Like, it's so awesome. I want to ask you about your faith, because I can hear that that's really important to you. I mean, it's got to be one of the most important things in your life. How do you think that informs your artistic process? I mean, you're just saying that this is why you're doing it, for the Lord. That's kind of like a primary thing. So where does that kind of enter the thought process when you're painting something? Like, I'll tell you something else that really grabbed my attention was this painting that you announced that you're doing a print run on, and it's the painting of the silo. And again, I come back to your quality of edges and form and just this painterly thing. Like I see, and I just personally here, when it doesn't matter what it is that I'm painting, I see something that God is doing. Okay. Like I see like light, form, texture, color, and it's everywhere. And it's trying to teach me to understand what it is I'm looking at. And if you just stop for a second, pay attention, you see it. But how do you find that personally, like in a silo or in a falcon or in somebody's face? Like where is that for you? Or here, like, okay, I want to throw something else here in the mix. Okay, something else in the mix. I think, again, I can't separate myself from this, because, when I go for something, it's almost like it's an easy sell to go, oh, well, this painting's about God and creation. If you're painting this epic mountain and it's got clouds and when it's all happening, then there's water in the foreground. Oh, and look, it's a waterfall and the birds come through. And you look at it and it's kind of like, oh yeah, he's clearly trying to paint like Bierstadt or follow in that kind of that vein. But then how do you see that in a moment that's so simple and it's just an interior view of a bed with a pillow that's just catching that light coming in through a window that's just, the curtains are just slightly open. You see the lights filtering through and that beautiful soft shadow of the lamp on the wall. How do you find that in an interior scene? Because I have no doubt that you found it, but how are you thinking about it when you're doing something like that? I don't even know what I'm asking you.
No, I feel like I know what you're asking me. And I also, yes, I do know what you're asking. I mean, your first question was that how does my faith inform my painting?
Mm-hmm.
And then also I understand. I don't know if I can say back to you the question that you're asking me, but I feel like I understand it. For me, my faith influences my painting in that I feel that I'm called to work for the glory of the Lord and not my own glory. And it glorifies the Lord to be excellent in whatever field each of us are called to, all of his children. So excellent craftsmen are making excellent kitchen cabinets. And they're doing that for God's glory because they're making something beautiful and amazing. And they're just kitchen cabinets. But we use kitchen cabinets every single day. And so to make the kitchen cabinets excellent and of good quality, that they can be used every day and last for a really long time, is good and honorable work. And that's glorifying to the Lord. So this is also kind of coming from my childhood. My father is extremely capable, and he made a lot of the things that, he built our house somewhat. And I've never seen someone hired to do a task in a house ever, because my dad always would do it. And so anyway, so I saw him excellently working, and at little tiny things, like fixing our sump pump, that's a huge deal if it's not right, but it's just a very menial task. But he just took so much pride in being able to do those things. So anyway, that's an aside. I really love my dad. And so being a painter and being excellent at painting is glorifying to the Lord. And I don't need to be painting a cross or a religious image for me. I do not, I'm not going to do that, but I can express that, my faith and my appreciation for creation by painting whatever I am painting excellently. And I think it will translate. So it's interesting because you bring up that bed painting. I woke up and I saw this and I just was so enamored by the light and this beautiful space. And I immediately saw the painting in my head. And over the course of painting it, sometimes I listen to painting, we talked about this a little bit, but I listen to sermons and I listen to books and sometimes very rarely music. But when I'm studio painting, like on commissions or things, I'm always listening to something. But when I'm plein air painting or painting from life, I very rarely am listening to anything. And I should actually write this down for myself because I've not really noticed this before. It would probably help me to be more silent while I'm doing my studio work. Because while I was painting that bed painting and while I'm painting things that have so gripped me like this, while I was painting that, I was just thinking about the beauty of the light and I was just trying to portray truthfully and excellently this very simple scene. And it just felt like the most important thing that I could be doing at that point. It was like, this is something that I'm called to do. So how can I answer your question and describe to you what I'm trying to say? I'm not sure if I can, except to say, my favorite works and the ones that touch me the most, I would like to figure out if I can, I've been trying to figure this out. with the silo, I was painting this barn, which I can't wait to get back to. There's actually, if you're in the video version, you can see it right here. I don't know if you'll crop the view, but this is a painting.
Yeah, I'll
from
cut that
barn.
in. I can see that. So that's kind of an interior view. So winter sun oil panel, 16 by 20.
Yep.
Yep, brilliant.
So
Beautiful.
I'm
Beautiful.
painting these barn interiors, these barns that are falling down, and they just feel like, it feels so important to me, like it's what I'm being called to paint. And I'm just surrounded by nature and just this feeling of this beautiful passages of light and this decay, which is just so beautiful. And while I'm painting and I'm surrounded by those things, I feel like I'm surrounded by the glory of the Lord, and just it's just, I don't know. Hopefully all the time. I feel kind of hyperventilating all the time because I see my husband. Literally, we were eating lunch yesterday, and I started like having this moment, and I was like, oh, I can't paint you right now. Like, we have to be done eating. But the light was falling on his face, and I could see it was just like this beautiful colors happening on his face, and I was just like, oh, I gotta paint that. That's so beautiful. You're so beautiful. And I was like, I can't paint that. And anyway, I think I actually am rambling now, except
No,
for
no. That is fantastic. You're on. You're on. It's like that switch in your brain has just gone click, and it happens for artists. I mean, as you're saying that, I just find myself nodding, and I'm kind of, I'm smiling to myself because it's like I have those moments, and what a treat to talk to you, because as I get more, further down the road of, and more involved with online stuff, social media stuff, business stuff, you become the hooks of the external get embedded in you and pull you away from what you should be focused on. And here you are looking at things. It's just a simple moment. Like I think what the artist should be doing is taking those things that most people miss. And this is why I love Joe Paquette and Joe Paquette's work. I mean, this guy,
yeah.
he's on. So he'll take a view that people walk by every day, right? It'll be like, stop, look at this. Here's something that you missed. Renato Machilo, right? I love that guy. He's an amazing painter. And when we had our podcast a while ago now, I must talk to him again. He was saying this landscape that you're looking at, this grand moment that you think that's a drainage ditch. Don't forget that. It's a drainage ditch. But it's finding the beauty in something that somebody wouldn't ordinarily see. And it's honest and it's gorgeous. And yeah, I can relate to that sense of anxiety, the flutters, the butterfly, this kind of tension. It's like, oh, now I want to go paint. Oh, come on. It's like, I got to get that Michael Klein. I got to get that Pashad palette out, just carry it everywhere in my shirt pocket. Just put it right there. We're painting now. Hold still. Finish chewing. Let's go.
Exactly.
But you said something there before, and I want to come back to that. And I was thinking, ooh, interesting. I wonder what's there. So you said that you wouldn't be painting religious images. So here faith is important to you. It's an important part of your walk as an artist. But then people from the outside would go, oh, great. So when can we look forward to seeing, Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane painted by Stephanie Paige Thomson? Or when are we going to see, a Sermon on the Mount or something like this? Would you ever tackle a biblical subject like that? And because you said you look, I won't do that, but what's there? What are your thoughts in relation to that subject matter?
That's interesting. For me personally, I don't think I will, because I believe what we have in the Bible is how God has revealed himself to us. And when he says you shall have no graven images, I believe that also refers to images of him, and that if he'd wanted us to know what he looked like, we probably would know. So what we need to know is about is his gospel. His gospel is the most important thing. So I won't personally make a painting of what Jesus could look like, because I don't think we know. And I don't think that that is something that I'm called to do as a painter. But I feel very strong to paint his creation. And I don't know about painting. I've thought about this because I saw a beautiful, what I am interested in, you probably won't ever see a painting of biblical figures by Stephanie Paige Thomson. But I recently saw a painting that Michael Klein actually did for Ligonier, which is this beautiful diptych landscape. And weaved throughout it is a very biblical theme of stones and thorns on one side, and then life-giving water on the other. And that is something that was so stirring to me, because I've not thought about melding those two things that way. I don't personally want to make an image of Christ per se, but when I saw this painting that he did, and he was sharing how even the passage of light was very loosely the image of a cross. You wouldn't look at it and be like, wow, there's a cross in the sky. But once he showed that, I could see it, and I just was so enamored by that. So that's something that I hope as I mature as a painter. I feel like I'm a baby painter. My dreams are to be able to paint pieces that are technically beautiful, but then also share things that are important to me, which feels a little self-centered, except for I don't think it actually is, because if I see something that's so beautiful and worth recording and sharing forever, I want to be able to do it in a really beautiful way, like the way I saw on Jamie's paintings of his wife. She was so important to him. I want to be able to paint the things that I love excellently and not be held back by the lack of ability to do that. So it's kind of a long answer to your question.
Brilliant answer though. No, brilliant answer. And again, but every time you answer one of my questions, it's you bring up so much. This is interesting because what you're saying there. It's like I've often thought about what is the artist's role in society as a whole, or in the world. Like what is the role? And then it caused me to think about, well, what are some of the artists that I really admire from the past that I really resonate with? We look at somebody like an Andrew Wyeth, a Jamie Wyeth, even their father, who's just a giant, incredible artist. But and again, as well, I mean, it's got to be said, everybody resonates with something different, but there are things that I still think are objective, not necessarily subjective, that we can all agree on. Oh, that's beautiful, that's meaningful, that actually touches the soul in a really interesting way. And I think whenever you're doing that authentically as an artist, you give somebody a moment of pause. So you're providing something for them in that moment. But then if they're an artist and they themselves are creative, you give them permission to shine. And that's, it's like, oh, they're doing it. I need to stop going for the grand thing of what I think is going to get me the validation, and start focusing on, again, I love what Susan Lyons was saying, follow your goosebumps. That's brilliant. Go for that thing because they were given to you. For me, I just personally, that's where God enters the mix for me, artistically speaking, is that those bolts of inspiration, I can't take any ownership of them, but right. It's like, no one's asking for this painting. Right. No one knows I'm going to do this painting. And in fact, sometimes I don't even want to turn the camera on because I make films, I make videos and stuff about my painting. I don't even want to film this bit. This is mine. This is for me. But I'm like,
Yep.
oh, I'll turn it on, but I'm going to forget about it. But it's interesting. Like, and it's interesting you say that. Yeah, I totally dig what you're saying about the religious paintings. I mean, I don't want to take away from an artist like Jeff Hine, for instance, who's doing these grand biblical scenes, like his Triumphal Arch. Credit where credit's due. Like, as a painting and technically, the guy's amazing. And some of those works are they blow my mind. And for somebody who was just solely dedicated to working from life, talk about the craft, and just working on it. And it shows in his work, the evidence of that hard graft, but I do totally get where you're coming from. That's kind of like the other side of things. It's like, how do you find God in a moment, and how do you find that in just what you're engaged in that moment? It's like, I am going to do this excellently, and I'm just going to show up excellently and be all there. Is there anything you can't apply that to?
I don't think so.
It applies to everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true.
Wow.
Which is interesting. It's a very exciting way to live, I think. If you do apply it to everything. By, I'm done painting now. I love to cook. And I apply this to cooking a lot. Like, sometimes I'll feel stressed of like, oh, every time I'm not doing anything other than painting, I need to just get back to painting, that I think artists have that, where they just have like this complex of, if I'm not painting, it's not worthwhile. At least I do. But when I'm thinking in the right mindset and thinking about my whole life, as opposed to just my painting life, which is a huge part of my life, but not the only thing in my life, doing each part excellently. And I take great joy, and I'm not just thinking about how I need to get back to the easel while I make dinner. I'm so inspired by just the colors and the textures in the dinner. And I literally the other night was just stressed out because I have this big painting I'm trying to finish. And it's being very challenging. And I just thought, you know what, I'm going to make dinner, and I'm going to make us a delicious dinner. And I literally was making it. And then I was like, I need to do still lifes of vegetables. I was like, they're so inspiring. I literally was like, I should set it up, and like, I'll set up and I'll paint just after I'm done making dinner. It's so inspiring. And it was just like the craziest thing. I realized, I was like, wow, look at that. Like, when I just let go again of my ego and just painting for all these other reasons, aside from just which is real. When you're a painter and it is your job, you have to turn the camera on. You have to be balancing. So I'm trying, and I'm hoping someday an artist older than me will teach me the perfect balance. I don't think it's out there, but
no, it doesn't exist. Let me tell you right now. I mean, I'm not that much older than you. Well, who am I kidding? I'm way older than you, but I'm still pretending. My mow is getting patchy because I keep plucking out the gray. But no, balance doesn't exist. It's a myth. It's a myth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the vegetable thing got me. That's something. It's like, we've got some the neighbors. So we're the only ones in the Bay here that are the permanent residents, but we've got holiday homes that are kind of either side. And fortunately, they're out of eyeshot. But each of these neighbors here in this Bay, they don't know it. I don't think they listen to the podcast, so I'm pretty safe in saying this. They've got enormous fig trees, and it's now fig season. So I'm fighting the possums to get to the figs. And basically, picking these figs off the tree, looking at it going, I got to paint these. You tear them open and they got that beautiful white flesh in there, and then the pink around the seeds. And I'm looking at this going, that's cool. I got to paint that. That's awesome. It's amazing where you find it. It's amazing where you find it.
You said this about when you said about you're painting something and no one knows you're going to paint it. And you're so excited about painting it. No one knows about it yet. I think that's one of the most exciting things about painting, is that you can make people care about something that they didn't care about at all. Never thought about once before they saw it.
Exactly.
And I learned, I feel like I've been learning this over time because, and I should write this huge on my studio wall because I painted a very large portrait of a woman in 2019 called Ingrid, just Ingrid. And
Beautiful.
it was
Lovely
huge.
painting.
And it was 36 by 48, a large painting, very specific, not a commission. And it's one woman, very simple background. And I just had this painting in my mind. It was the biggest painting I'd done to date at that point. And the whole time I was painting it was just fighting off these feelings, but I really wasn't fighting them because I kept thinking like, am I going to die with this painting in my studio? No one is going to buy this. And I just thought, it doesn't matter. I need to paint this. And I really just fought it off. And that was one of the pieces that won Best of Show, and it sold. And the woman that bought it called me on the phone and literally said, when I saw this painting in the gallery, I knew you had painted it for me, and I want to say thank you for painting her for me. So I get to live with her now. And I was so struck, and I'm just so stupid because I just keep forgetting this and I fight within myself trying to paint the sensational thing. And how can I be sensational when it's just, at least for me, that is not what I'm supposed to do. So, like I learned that, like I can paint something that matters to me and no one else even cares. No one even knows Ingrid. I mean, a lot of people know Ingrid. She's very lovely and of friends to many, but
Ingrid is a stunning painting. I'm looking at it right now. And so the freshness and the looseness of that, the background, but the way you've painted that face, the pose, the motion in it, it's stunning. It's a stunning painting. And I'm really sorry to do this, but I can't help it, Stephanie. I can't help. I don't want to sound like I'm patronizing here, but this is not the work of how old were you when you did this? 22? So you said 2019?
yes.
22 years old. That is not the work of a 22-year-old. It's just not. So I just look at you like what are you? Where did you come from? My goodness, you've really got a gift here, and you're taking it seriously, and that's awesome. Like that's awesome. The drive is there, the passion is there, and you're not wasting a moment of this. Let's geek out about art. But one thing before we do, I want to go back and I want to ask you about your Phyllis here, which is study from life of Zorn. There's a drawing here, but the falcon. Falconry is something that comes up a lot in some of these paintings, and the falcon wearing the hood on the perch. Beautiful painting, modern huntress, oil on panel, 24 by 12. Stunning little painting here. Tell me about the falcon and what's your fascination with the bird, and how is that important to you personally?
Yeah. I became a falconer when I was 16. So I was a falconer before I was a painter, seriously. And the process of becoming a falconer in the United States involves having a mentor that will teach you as an apprentice for 2 years how to do falconry. You have to become licensed in a couple different ways and build and make a lot of equipment, and then eventually trap and train a wild bird of prey to hunt game with, and then eventually release back into the wild. So I started doing this when I was 16, and I have had, over the course of those intervening years, I believe it's 8 birds, 8 different, but it might be 7. I can't remember 100%. So at least 7 birds I've had the opportunity to train from the wild, and then hunt with and release. So you go from having a bird that you just get to be so close to nature. And I love how, you know, when you're driving on the freeway, you see birds on signs, but you never get to see all of these little aspects to them and just be so close to nature. So anyway, each bird has their own personality. And in the course of having all of those different birds, you'll see, I think Zorn was one that I painted a lot. So Modern Huntress is a bird named Zorn. I had a bird named Sergeant. You'll catch the drift here with these names. Sergeant was my number one, probably best bird I ever had. Ironic. And I don't know if I painted him per se. I did do a drawing, but anyway, so I just, when I was learning about how to meld my, you know, my loves and then my ability to paint, I used to just paint things, you know, academically sort of, you know, models from life drawing, those kind of things. I realized, oh, falconry is really important to me and I should be drawing and painting it more. It's a very time consuming sport. So it was sometimes, you know, hard to meld the two just because I was spending so much time on each and bringing them together was difficult. But anyway, so the inspiration behind that is just pure fascination with the birds and being just totally enamored with their personalities, their anatomy, and just, I think they're just beautiful. So the painting of Phyllis, you'll see there's a couple of birds and interiors, maybe just one. When I was in Maine, I was able to train and live with a bird for a little while. And so she lived in my living room and I painted her as she lived in my living room.
Beautiful. Beautiful. It's absolutely stunning. I've got a real soft spot for birds of prey, personally. I've always been fascinated with them since I was a little boy. And when I was about, well, I must have been 9 or 10, I made my own little field identification charts. And I was able to tell at kilometers away, just based on a flight pattern. It's like, oh, that's a black-shouldered kite. No, that's a kestrel. Oh, that's a, the high shape of the V of one in the back. I was like, oh, that's a wedge-tail out that way. And this was all Australian birds of prey. But when I saw these, I'm like, ooh, I really want to do more birds. In fact, in my studio, I don't think you can see. I don't think you can see from, well, you won't be able to see from this view. I've got a kestrel, taxidermy kestrel. I don't know how you feel about taxidermy, sorry, but a vintage taxidermy, vintage. Okay.
I'm fine.
A kestrel above my my desk right here. And then a barn owl and a kingfisher over there. Yeah. So eventually I'll be painting them, but it's, yeah, they're going to hold nice and still for me. But yeah, it's so cool though. When I saw these, I'm like, oh, very, very interesting. Let me ask you about the process now, about the process of painting, because there's a few technical things I would love to just pick your brain about, down to the the materials that you're using. So I'm looking here, we've got a view looking into your studio. I can see that some of these and a lot of your work on your portfolio says panel over again, panel, oil on panel. Is that your go-to surface for painting on? And what kind of panel are you using?
It is my go-to surface right now. Whether it's a panel, a linen on a panel, or the type of panel that I'm using now, which is this ACM board. This is a tiny painting of a.
Oh, beautiful.
But,
hold that up to the camera so we can see it. Come on. That is beautiful. Lovely.
You kind of can't see it super well, but anyway, the surface, you can see it's very hard, and it's just this plastic material that I buy from an industrial source called Piedmont Plastics. Ironically, let's just shout out Michael Klein again. He has a whole video on YouTube about making lead primed ACM board, and I do his exact process. So I also ironically have a video on my Instagram that I made showing you how I make it. So you can go to either Michael or you can go to my Instagram and find out how I do it. But
Awesome.
it's a wonderful surface. What I love about it is it can be wiped back to white, and I can get transparency in layers to a point. So that's what I paint on right now.
So no color ground before you start painting. You're just working directly onto the surface of the white panel.
Yes. But I do have to put a ground down, but it's a white ground.
Okay.
So
yeah.
There's a sticker on here.
Yeah.
I just don't take the sticker off. And then it's just this plastic, very smooth. And I sand this, and then with an icing tool, put on this lead alkyd ground. And once that dries, I paint right on top of that.
Lead alkyd. So are you using a Gamblin product, or are you using Liquid Original, or?
It's actually a Natural Pigments, Rublev.
Right.
Familiar with them?
Yep.
It's a Natural Pigments product. I don't have it up here, it's downstairs, but it's a lead ground. And then I'm not super knowledgeable in the alkyd region, but from what I know, alkyd is something that makes things dry faster. Is that true to also your knowledge?
Yeah, for sure it is.
I'm sure it does more, but it dries within 24 hours. So and you can paint on it within 24 hours. And I've gone through lots of different processes of gluing different panels, different types of linen to panels, and there's bubbles, and it's really time consuming. And I've also done it where you prime it, you do rabbit skin glue on the wood, and then you put all these layers, and they have to dry for a month in between each layer, and then you have to wait for 6 months before you paint on it. And I am not.
Nobody got time for that. Nobody got time for that.
And the result wasn't even something that was like, oh, I can't get a better result than this. So I've tried a couple different things, and the panels I can buy, I used to use Centurion linen panels. I just not a huge fan of the results right now. So maybe I'll change and I'll want a more scratchy surface, but right now I really like this smooth surface. So this is the same painting surface I used for a lot of my recent paintings, but Main Man, I also used this
brilliant
aluminum panel.
Brilliant. So then as you're kind of building up your painting, because the freshness kind of really does feel like it's painted a la prima, but you mentioned layering. So typically how many layers would you be using? And let's use Main Man as a painting here. How many layers would you have in that painting there?
Different parts have different amounts, I think. The background has 2 layers. His face has probably 6 because there's 5 other faces underneath.
I know the feeling.
So roughly 2 to 3, because I'll usually, with that painting specifically, I started extremely colorfully with thin washes of bright color, and then brought it down to where I wanted it to be, thinking I could always make it less bright, but it would be difficult to make it brighter at the end. So and I also used some really fun paint sticks also at the start of that. So they're like big crayons with oil paint. I don't use those too much, mostly just because I don't have very many, but so the background, I had a really light colorful wash, and then his clothes had a light wash, but then I went right in straight away just on his face, but had to do several layers to get it right. So
and are the layers drying between passes?
Yes.
So you're mixing alkyd into your layers as you're working. You're using some of that alkyd, or what's accelerating the drying time?
You know what accelerates a lot is this. I use a lot of Nia McGill. I've used. I really love. There's another product I love, Merige, but it gives me terrible headaches. And Gamsol has started giving me terrible headaches. So I've kind of gone away from using those things, and I've started using walnut oil and Neomagilp to be my thinning agent. And I think that makes the paint dry a lot faster. So I used to try to keep everything really wet and work wet into wet. And then I've recently been a lot more interested in texture. And so allowing things to dry in between, I've heard people say it's terrible for archival purposes that it'll crack, but I also brought that up to CW Mundy at some point, and he said, you know what, all those painters that are dead now, if they could see their paintings and how cool they look all cracked, if I could make my paintings crack right now, I would. It looks so cool. He's like, I want that to happen to mine. And I just thought, wow, that's a different perspective I didn't think of. So
I want to just issue an apology right now to Virgil Elliott if he's listening. He's tearing his hair out. What are you talking about? He's the archival dude. He's but I totally get that. I totally get that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that one specifically was drying in between the different layers.
It's beautiful. Texture is something as well that you seem to use strategically, and it's beautiful. Like your lighter areas are and again, I wish I could see the original. I'm just looking at it on the screen, but your lighter areas seem to have that tooth and that there's a physicality to the paint. You know, the one that I love, and again, talk about those moments. Well, that one's beautiful. Like I'll talk about that, which is, what's the name of this one? The Gate at Bunker Hill. Beautiful painting. In texture, it plays such a key role in that piece. But then this one here of Eldridge House, oiled 9x12, your lighter areas where that sun is just pinging off the side of that weatherboard, and the shadows and the reflected light, and that beautiful use of cool. I'm guessing cerulean or it's cobalt teal. What'd you use there? That's cool.
I don't remember what color I used there. It was probably usually the blues I have on my palette are ultramarine, King's blue, and then I've been playing with this very brilliant sort of like teal color. So that
cobalt teal. Please tell me cobalt teal. Cobalt teal is so cool.
I'll look really fast, and I'll tell you exactly what it is. This noise is gonna be difficult to edit out.
That's all right. That's all right.
Oh, here it is. No, it's this old Holland color. That's I'm not going to be able to pronounce it right, but it's like Scheveningen blue.
Scheveningen blue. Yeah, my buddy Freeman will know what that is. What is the chemical number on the back of that tube?
Where do I find that?
It'll say right there on the label. Oh, Stephanie, come on. Where do you find the chemical name? That's your go-to. That's what you need, is you need the chemical compound that's in that color. It'll be like a chemical code, like a PB or a
You
PG.
just taught me something new. PW4, PW6, PB15.
That's got zinc white in it. That's got zinc white. Don't use zinc white. PW6, I believe, is zinc, or PW4, one of those. But if it's got them both in there, guaranteed it's got it. Permanent white 4, I think, is titanium. Fact check me on this one, folks. Don't quote me on that. But the issue with zinc is, don't freak out, please. But the issue with zinc is delamination from an archival standpoint. If you mix it and incorporate it in with enough colors, you might be okay. But, you know, speaking of Virgil Elliott, when talking to him and reading his book, it's disastrous. It's absolutely disastrous. There have been people that have been priming their canvas with zinc white primer, for instance, and their paintings are peeling off like stickers. The delamination is off the charts. So it's talking about cracking. That just causes huge, and a lot of cracking is issues with delamination. But zinc white, ain't nobody should be using that. It's either lead or titanium. Titanium's got its problems, but lead white's where it's at. So have a look. In fact, I tell you what, I'm gonna oil paint PW6. That's permanent white 6. Okay, what is it?
I mean, it literally says on here zinc oxide right there. So that's
zinc oxide. Yeah. Straight away in the bin.
Straight away, throw away.
Straight away. Don't even think about it. Just boom, out of there. Cobalt teal.
Well,
That's
thank you for teaching me this.
I highly recommend Virgil Elliott's book, Traditional Oil Painting. The guy's a masterful technician of the craft of painting. Like he knows the chemistry behind it. So shout out to Virgil. I'm gonna have him on the podcast again very, very soon. Awesome guy, but he knows his stuff when it comes to, you know, putting together an image that's gonna last and stand the test of time, in my opinion. You know, I think he's got it.
I'll check it out.
This is exciting. So does your okay, more geeking out about painting and just let me ask you a couple more things here. This is so much fun. Does your palette change as you're producing you know, different works? Do you kind of mix it up and shift it up depending on your subject, or do you have pretty much, no, this is what Stephanie Paige Thomson uses and it's just adapted and molded to fit the subject?
Right now, I have two pretty primary palettes depending on what I'm going after. And I would like to be more exploratory to see what other tools I can use to add in. But I have a pretty set palette for every day, which is sort of large, and it's almost a split primary palette. So I have several yellows. I have like a lemon cadmium and a cad medium, and then I have a color that I am trying to take away from my palette because it's my favorite color and I just want it to be part of every mixture, and it shouldn't be, you know, it's like a comfort color, kind of like I just want to put everything into everything, and that's raw sienna. I love this color. It's just warm and it's anyway. So I'm trying to actually, it's not on my palette right now because I'm trying to break up a little bit just for healthy reasons. And then do you want to hear the whole palette, or do you want...
Yeah, no,
okay.
This is interesting. It's interesting what you say about the raw sienna, because I've got colors like that as well, and they are those comforting things that just, there it is again. And yeah, sometimes I would like to shift it up a bit, but it's like, no, I need you in my life. You have to be here.
Yeah, you have to be on the palette. And it does have a great use because I really am interested in transparency and opacity right now. And so it is so helpful because it is a deep yellow that is transparent. So it's just really helpful to add to warm, darker colors up without increasing the value as much as you would if you were using anyway. So it plays a purpose. And then I have cadmium red and alizarin crimson and transparent oxide red, which is another color that I'm trying to break up with, but
I love it.
I have yet to meet a painter that doesn't love it. And
it's stunning.
What brand do you use?
So I'm a Blue Ridge guy. Shout out to Eric Silver from Blue Ridge Oils. So they're handmade in North Carolina is where he is, and amazing handmade oils. He's got a small operation, but it's pretty much all I use. I have got a few other oils kind of floating around. Occasionally I'll get out the tube of Williamsburg. We've got a brand down here, down under, that I've still got several tubes left, that is just kind of like the rough and ready oil paint, but that's mainly for those colors like the titanium white, ultramarine blue, burnt umber, which is the basis of a lot of my painting. Because I'm very tonal in that way. But the transparent red oxide, Blue Ridge makes a beautiful one. It's very different to the other brands that I've used, but I love it. It's tonally a little bit lighter, but one of my favorite things for portraits that I found is that turquoise phthalo, which is quite weird because it's such a punchy green for portrait. But then you balance it out with its complementary opposite, which is your transparent red oxide. And then you've got transparent yellow oxide as well, which is kind of similar to the raw sienna, but it's got a little bit more of a pungent stain quality to it, but it is really transparent. But that's the thing. You were talking about the subtle value shift, or sorry, temperature shift without blowing out your values. Those two colors, like the transparent red and the transparent yellow, they're fantastic for just getting a key, just a few notches left or right. Just, yeah, it's cool. It's cool.
They're so great.
Yeah.
Love those colors.
It's really interesting. So, wow, man, I could talk to you about painting and just geek out about this all friggin' day. That's awesome. So before that, there was one thing though that you were saying earlier when you were talking about this painting in particular with Main Man, and how long it was before the show, and then how long you spent on the painting. And it's like screeching into that kind of that finish line almost. And so was it dry? Because there's a lot of these places that have got these rules about you're shaking your head. It's like, no wet paintings, please. I hear that like what I see on the submissions for competitions. It's like no wet paintings. I'm like, okay.
Mhm.
I guess I'm out because I'm always working right up to that finish line. So what was it that helped her? So that was the Neo McGill and the walnut oil. Walnut's not something I've had much experience with. That dries pretty quick.
I think walnut oil actually extends the time.
Right.
So maybe I'm using linseed oil. I'm not sure. I poured it into this container a while ago and I kind of forgot what it is, but I'm pretty sure it's walnut oil. Because I have walnut oil up there. But
Cool.
the thing with the Main Man was it was finished, but some parts were dry and then some parts were wet. So the finish was also shiny and matte in some areas. So I was having a lot of problems. So what I ended up doing was oiling out the dry parts to match the wet parts, which were still shiny. So I could, because I took a photo of it and entered it with the photo. It wasn't the physical thing, but
oh, okay, right.
I've never yet shipped a painting that is still wet, but I'm pretty sure it will happen at some point.
Well, if you've got the aluminum panel, then yeah, it'd be a trick to ship that. But I guess it holds itself so flat that you could get that gap of air between that and the painting. The beauty of so I do a lot of big work, but I'm doing it on stretched linen. So I'm just rolling these paintings up and shipping it in a tube. It's really difficult to get something that's 2.5 meters long to a client. It's like, I ain't shipping that.
Right.
You come and get it.
So then how did they stretch it on the other end?
Well, they stretch it on the other end. It just gets shipped to a framer or an art conservator. Normally my clients like have a guy that will do it, or somebody that's a technician on the other end. Particularly in Western Australia, a lot of my work goes back to Perth in Western Australia, where I basically started. And shout out to Guest Fine Art Services. They stretch a lot of my work and will frame it up. When I say a lot, on the odd occasion, I get a commission that's big enough that requires stretching, and they've done that several times. So yeah, normally you can find somebody.
That's really good to know. I feel like I'm in a constant flux of looking for new materials and things, and so that's interesting to hear about. What brand of linen do you use?
So I use a Belgian linen or sometimes an Italian linen. I do really like the Claessens or Claessens. I used PL 170 for years. The only issue with PL 170, and that portrait behind me right there of Russell was painted on it. At some camera angles, when people are watching the video, they'll see that there is a dominant weave depending on where you stretch it, how you stretch it. It's either vertical or horizontal. And some people find that distracting. I kind of liked it, but then eventually it got on my nerves. So I found the Bell Artie had a flat weave, but they're all triple primed. And I prefer the acrylic primed because I find that that's more flexible and durable. And then I'm going over the top with oils. But the beauty is, you want that flexibility. Because I'm using alkyd resins, liquid mainly, it's permanently flexible. It plasticizes your oil paint, effectively. So you don't want to abuse it or overuse it, but it just gives it a little bit of flexibility, makes it nice and durable. So when you roll it around a core, and my core is about like 10 centimeters or 100 millimeters, right? So it's a cardboard tube. The paint gets rolled around that. but there's a wax release paper on the physical surface of the painting. So
Okay.
even if it is sitting in the tube for a long time, it won't stick to itself. And
Okay.
it can sit there and it's happy. But then that goes inside a massive PVC plumbing tube. And you could do just about anything to this painting in transit, and it's going to make it there in one piece. It's fine. I glue one end. I put a big screw cap on the other end. It can be expensive. So just for the materials and shipping a painting can be up to $200 here at Down Under. A lot of that stuff is expensive. It'd be a lot cheaper stateside for a lot of this stuff, but it makes it doable. All the small stuff, anything below 24 by 20, that's all on a panel. Anything above is stretched, so.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. There's a lot of, there's a lot of cool materials out there, but I find the more artists I talk to, I'm like, what are you doing? How are you doing that?
Can I do that?
Yeah. Who does that? Hook me up. Come on, So I've heard, now from Joe Paquette and Mark Maggiore as well. They're both using the New Traditions panels, but it's a foam core, it sounds like, which is like, oh, that's fascinating. So keen to try that. Yeah.
It's interesting because I feel like in the time that I've been painting, which is not long in any grand scheme of things, I heard people say things like, okay, you have to have the best materials or else you can't make good work. You have to have all expensive everything, and then I was like, okay, well, I can't afford that. So so I was doing my best to, get good brushes and things like that. And then I talked to other artists and they said, oh yeah, and they're, big names, and they're using student grade paint, and they're using brushes from Michaels, and they're using Frederick's panels and making incredible paintings. And so it's really fascinating to me to learn what other artists use, because there are people out there making incredible paintings with Michaels brushes and student grade paint. And that was something that someone told me in a workshop. They said, you can create amazing work with meager tools. It's by having the better tools and the best palette and the best studio lights and the best easel, that's not going to make you a better painter. Mm-hmm. So work on being a better painter. So anyway, good quality paint and things. I don't use student grade paint, but anyway, it's really fascinating what can be made out there with just also different people's philosophies. One person's like, oh, I only use this brand, and then the other person is like, yeah, whatever. House painting brushes.
Yeah. I think when and this is also, the main thing behind the podcast is when I reach out to artists like yourself. Every artist has got a different creative journey, but a different way of doing things. And it's my hope that in hearing these, even we don't do a whole lot of shop talk here on the Creative Endeavor. But I want to do a lot more of that, because I think that's something that people find interesting. It's certainly something that interests me. Yeah. For every artist, there's a new way of doing it, a new way of doing things. And it makes this idea of competition go out the window, and this notion of who's the best one out there. It's like, no, man, there's room for everybody. Everybody's different and everybody's valid. Right. Everybody's, and we all have a valid way of doing it. However, that said, there are some things, that you're not going to get away from some cause and effect. There are some things that artists use that I think are problematic. And health also, you were mentioning getting headaches, right, from things. I tell you one thing that just knocks me out, and that's mineral turpentine or mineral spirits. Pure gum, not a problem. But the petroleum-based products, good night. I get a migraine, something chronic, and I'll be there it'll be with me the whole day, and there's nothing I can do to get rid of it. As soon as I whiff it, it's like, I'm out. So I can't have the solvent in the studio. But, that said, liquid has got a volatile component. It's called butanone oxime. Yeah. I have no idea what that does to the body. I don't think it's great, but I don't react to it at all. I get weird twitches and night terrors, and my skin feels like it's peeling, but I can't be related.
The voices keep telling me I should stop using it, but
No,
that's so funny.
the voices are telling me more, mix more in, more, eat a little bit, eat a little bit.
I want to use liquid, but
Yeah.
people here are frown upon it so intensely. I don't
Why?
even know where I can find it
Why?
because it's so
Why?
bad for you.
What do you mean it's bad for you? Look,
That's what I've heard.
everything's bad for you. Look, so we could go all the way with this. Like, have a little bit of ventilation. Don't mix a whole bunch out. Don't have copious amounts of it out. Don't get it on your skin. Fair enough. If you're going to mix it into your coffee, just a quarter teaspoon at a time. You know? Don't go overboard with this. But the thing is that you can't go overboard. And there's a lot of artists out there, right? Okay, I'll just put this out here. There's a lot of artists out there talking about toxicity of materials. Oh, I don't want to use lead. I don't want to use cobalt or cadmium or have solvents and stuff. And these are the same people that are going to McDonald's. Right. It's like you know, you got to, it's give and take, you know. So and you got to kind of balance this out with everything else. Like, I use a lot of toxic stuff to do what I do, but it's not in the air. And a lot of the danger comes down to how you're using it. I see some artists when they're painting, I never understood this. I hope you're not one of these painters. I'll hang up on you immediately. But they get paint everywhere. They get paint all over their hands, all over their clothes. They'll be chewing on the end of their brush. They'll be blending with their finger. What is this thing with blending with your finger? You're using cadmium. Don't touch it. It's like, oh, I'm just going to get a little blend effect there with my finger.
Oh my gosh.
That's you, isn't it? You're doing that, aren't you? That is you.
No.
Good.
Okay, I have done that, but I don't make a practice of it. Oh. But I have done that just because there was one time and I just was like, oh, if I can just get this. And it was like, anyway. But I've started using gloves a lot in the studio because it's interesting. I clean my house with toxic things. And so it does a good job cleaning our house. So I've limited my use of solvents extremely, and it has helped with my headaches. I just am too young and I have a lot more painting ahead of me to be having a headache all the time. So anyway, I do, when I remember, wear blue gloves when I paint, but I'm not eating my paint. I'm not getting it all over my body. I do occasionally drop a brush and then it gets on places, but at this point, I'm not super concerned about going cadmium free. But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the best colors and the best paint of all time, I think, like the best thing that anybody who's concerned with archival stuff, lead white, that's the best stuff right there. And transparency as well. Oh, come on. And it's not great for you. It's right. Really not. Like, lead's terrible. I don't know what it does. Like, I know it interrupts or you know, does something to the nervous system. I mean, a lot of the people in ancient times that were drinking out of lead goblets, they went insane. They went absolutely insane because a lot of these heavy metals lodge themselves in our fatty tissues and they don't come back out again. And that's part of, I guess, the body's way of dealing with toxicity, is that it traps it in fat and just keeps it there. And it doesn't break down or leave. It just kind of goes, no, this is dangerous. I'm going to keep it here in the fatty tissues. But your brain's mostly fat, isn't it? I think a lot of it ends up in your brain. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I have no idea what I'm talking about, but it's not great. It's not great. But you know, just having a good studio practice, but the solvent is really tricky. I try to use as natural as I can. Pure gum turpentine, again, it's not something I have much of an issue with. Essentially, it's an organic material. The petroleum distillates is what does it to me. You know, oil byproducts, petroleum byproducts, or mineral turpentine. Acetone can do it, lacquer thinners, kerosene, you know, various things like that. But pure gum turpentine or gum turpentine, after a while, it can make your brushes hard and sticky, but you can loosen them back up again with fresh turpentine. But I don't mix it into my paint. I was just using it for the brushes. By the way, but before I forget, I have to ask you about your brushes. The brushes you're using to put together a painting, like, again, let's talk about, you know, a gate at Bunker Hill. the way you're photographing, like, I tell you what I appreciate about your work. I can see the texture of the brush, but I can also see bits of pigment and maybe a little bit of dust or maybe a bristle. I'm definitely seeing a paint bristle right there in that. But and I'm not fussing at you by saying that. I appreciate it that it's there. It also makes me feel better because I have a lot of stuff in my paintings that's just there. And I'm like, actually, it's kind of cool. I'm going to leave the dust in there. It's catching the light. It's kind of cool. What are the brushes that you're using to put together these images? Do you prefer bristle over synthetic? Do you use natural hair? Like, what are you using here?
Currently, and for that painting, I used a mixture of synthetic and bristle. So I have my favorite ones right now are these long bristles. They're like long filberts. I'm not a huge fan of the squared edges right now. What are those called? Just what are the
flats?
There's filberts and
flats and brights. Flats and brights. Yeah, yeah. I've got that boxy shape to the end of them. Yeah.
They don't feel good, and I don't like them right now. I'll probably change, but I just don't like them very much. So, and then I have these bristles. They're imitation like mongoose, I believe, that I really love to use. There's also a brush I love from Rosemary called the Combers, I believe, a clip.
Love them. Love them. That's a real long filbert, isn't it? The comber.
Yes.
Yeah. Real long filbert. Yeah. Shout out Rosemary. They're amazing. Yeah.
I love them. I love them. So I use a mixture of those. And I actually, I also have a brush set from Rosemary, which is CW Mundy's, which is the Mundy mop, which is like extremely soft bristle.
That's a Mundy mop. That's where the name came from. That's one of my favorite brushes. I love that brush. I use it all the time for like, if I have to oil in or oil out, I'll use a Mundy mop. I'm like, cool. That's so cool.
Those are his. So I love those.
Is he painting with those? Like he's actually.
Yes.
Wow.
Actively with Neo McGilp, because they're so thick. He uses Neo McGilp to be able to make the paint move. And so you don't have to use quite as much paint because it would just use up like your whole palette just to fill the brush, because it's so dense. So he uses Neo McGilp as well. Wow. I use a mixture of all those different brushes. I kind of forget. I don't know if you have this. I kind of forget what I have other brushes while I'm painting, and that I can use a tool better suited for the task at hand by just switching brushes. So that's something I'm working towards about. I just will start with a brush and then go all the way through with one brush and then realize, oh, I could have traded it up. But
it's weird. Like when I'm painting a landscape or a portrait or a still life, the brushes they're shifting up all the time. Like my favorite for portraits are filberts, evergreens, and eclipses, and they're just beautiful, made by Rosemary Go. And then for a still life, I'll use some long filberts, evergreens, eclipses, and then a lot of synthetics. A lot of ivories are coming out. And then finally, for landscape work, I'm using the bristle dagger all the time.
Really?
Because I kind of have to, because it's named after me. It's called the Tish, made by Rosemary. Yeah. So
I wasn't aware of that. That's awesome.
I'm going to send you a hat when it's finally made, and I'm getting some stupid merch made, and it's a patch on the front of a baseball cap, and it says, "Do you even Tish, bro?" I'll send you that.
Please, I would love that.
You'll never
I will wear it all the time.
No, you won't.
No, I do. I wear a hat all the time. I have this like kind of wide brim for painting. I have this wide brimmed hat, and I was doing this painting of a couple indoors, and I wore this hat because there's all this other light, and there was someone there, and I, at some point I just wore it all day, like it's like a sun hat. And at the end of the day, I was like, oh, and I just took it off. I was like, when I'm done painting, I don't need this to shield my eyes from the light. And this guy that was there that was watching was like, oh, I wondered about that. He's like, I wondered why you were wearing that. I'll definitely wear that.
No, it's cool. I mean, I live in a baseball cap. A lot of people are going, does he have hair? Obviously he has hair, but the top is like Dr. Phil. So No, but I've got a few hats coming. I've got the Keep It Real with Cobalt Teal, Landscape Champ, and Do You Even Tish Bro. It's so dumb, but it's my sense of humor coming through, I guess, which is stupid. And there's only one person that gets it, and that's me, and it's awesome.
Awesome.
But I'll hook you up with a baseball cap. Stephanie, this has been such a treat, what a pleasure talking to you. Before we wrap up, I would love to know what's next for you. What's really exciting you artistically? What's some of the things on the horizon that you're looking forward to? What can we expect to see from you in the coming months and even the next couple of years?
That's a very exciting question and huge. On the near horizon, I have my first paintings in a museum show, which is very exciting. That was sort of a loose goal to have paintings in a museum. So that's very exciting, close goal. But ultimately right now, I feel like I'm just so thankful because I feel like I'm on the edge of being able to I feel like this all the time, so maybe this is not different, but I just feel like I'm just about to paint something that I've never painted before. And so I feel that especially right now, as I've just recently moved and things are just a lot more settled personally. And I just feel like I'm in a really great spot. And I'm so excited and inspired by this barn series that I've just started. And you mentioned the print that I am running for a limited time, but I just feel so called to be doing these pieces, and the barn is coming down in a short period of time. So ultimately close time range is I'll just be keeping painting, and in the next couple of years I hope to be able to keep painting and to actually do the things that we talked about today, and paint from a place of joy and not ego, and just for the joy of painting, and then share that with others. I've taught a workshop in the past, and I hope to be able to do more of that in the future. And so next couple of years, hopefully that would start happening on a wider basis, and just be able to keep painting. I just want to keep painting as many things as I can before I die. There's way too much out there I just want to keep painting.
That's awesome. You're inspired and you're moving in the right direction. Then this is epic. It's been awesome following your journey from afar on social media. I'll let everybody know where they can find you on social media, but let me just say thank you so much for being on this episode of The Creative Endeavor.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really wonderful to speak with you and just share ideas and everything. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for spending this time with me here in the studio, and a huge thank you to Stephanie Paige Thomson for joining me on this episode of The Creative Endeavor. What an epic conversation this was. I really hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. Now, right now, please go and follow Stephanie Paige Thomson on Instagram. She can be found, all one word, at Stephanie Paige Thomson. That last name is spelled P-A-I-G-E, and Thomson is spelled Thomson. So all in one word, at Stephanie Paige Thomson, and at her website, www.stephaniepagethomson.com. And I'll make sure that I include those links with the description that went with this podcast. So find that wherever you're listening to the audio version. I'm sure you're going to be blown away by her work, just as I am. It's just incredible stuff. I really look forward to seeing what the future holds for her. I wish her all the best and all the success in the world. Such vision. She's so inspired. Such heart, too. Incredible stuff. And maybe one day very soon we'll get her back on The Creative Endeavor for a round 2 of the podcast. That would be something. Now, if you haven't done so already, please take a moment and leave me a rating or a review on whatever audio platform you're listening on. Thank you so much for doing so. As I said, it makes a huge difference to the show and getting it up there in the ranks. Thank you so much. And while you're at it, go ahead and share this with a friend, anyone that you think might be inspired by the creative endeavor. Also, loads of people coming through with the hashtag The Creative Endeavor on Instagram, taking screenshots of the podcast and what episode they're listening to. Thanks so much for doing that. Thanks for sharing that. I make sure that I try to share that on my story too. Whenever I see that come up on my feed, I go ahead and share that with the people following me. Really appreciate that. It just helps push this out to more and more people. Now, I did say in a previous episode that this podcast was niche. Well, not really anymore. It's getting out there more and more. And man, you know what? I couldn't do this without you. I think the creative endeavor is here to stay. As long as there's a free internet and as long as there's breath in my body, I'm going to keep reaching out to other artists, recording these conversations and sharing them with you. So thanks for being here. Thanks for being in this space. It's so awesome to be spending this time with you. Now, if you haven't already done so as well, and you want to find out more about me, if you're just listening for the first time or you don't have much of an idea about who you're listening to right now, you can find me on my website, www.andrewtischler.com. I'm also on YouTube. I'm all over social media. Just search my name. And also, while you're at it, make sure you subscribe through my website. That's free to do so. And I'm in touch with my subscribers there regularly. What an epic podcast. I'm buzzing. Are you buzzing? I'm buzzing. It's that creativity. You feel it coursing through your veins. I'm going to go and just put that into a painting right now and just, I'm on fire. I even listened to the rough cut of some of the upcoming episodes that I cannot wait to share with you. Mark Maggiore, yep, you heard it. He's coming up very, very soon. Looking forward to sharing that episode with you. Okay. So long. It's been awesome. I'll see you again very soon in another episode of The Creative Endeavor.